everybody. Welcome to today's episode. As we wrap up this season, my prayer for you is that all this information that you've taken in, that you're going to run it through a few filters. The first filter is this, the filter of your faith. What is God saying to you through all the information that you've gathered that's specific to this season of life? And then the second one is this. What is God saying to you about your family and about the values that you have in your family? How does all of this information maybe fit in to what you're doing and what you value? And then the last one would be this. Finally, how does this information help inform maybe the direction of your family? Where are you going? Is there anything that you've learned that maybe you want to put into action? Now, I ask these questions and I bring these filters because our aim as believers is not to be conformed to the world. It's seemingly easy to just fall into the ways of the world. They seem easy, they're obvious, and we just roll with it. That's not the goal. The aim is that we would be transformed by the renewing of our mind, and we have a lot of new information. And so the goal is that there would be some change and transformation. You know, this podcast is called The Informed Parent. And it's for this reason. Informed parents make informed decisions. But I would offer this. God doesn't talk a whole lot about information. He talks a lot about wisdom. He doesn't talk a lot about information. And here we are in the information age. At every turn, we have more information coming to us and at us. So what do we do with all of that? I would say this. Information is important because it's a baseline. You can't get to wisdom and understanding if you don't have any information. But information in and of itself, it doesn't change anything. It doesn't move the needle. And then maybe you've listened to this podcast for inspiration. Maybe you've been inspired. I have been. There's so many people that have brought solutions to the problems that we're seeing in culture. And it's inspiring to see what they're doing. And maybe we're inspired for a moment to be like them or to do something like that. And that's great. Inspiration, it moves our heart, but it doesn't necessarily make changes. Long-term changes for our family and for the direction of our family. And so my question is, what does move the needle? And it's really this. You know, we want to move from information and inspiration into application. It's application that really changes the trajectory of our family, not just in the moment, but for generations to come. And so I'm going to ask you one more question. What really gets us to a place of application? And here's what I think the answer is. We have to have revelation. And what I mean by that is revelation is really when God opens our eyes up to see something the way he sees it. And when we move to adjust and align our decisions and our actions to the new thing that we see, that's application, and that brings transformation. That's available to us. So when we're listening to all this information, it's important. We need to know. But the goal is transformation for your family, and that's what I hope is happening. So we're going to talk a little bit about intentionality. I think, I talk to parents all the time, and I have for years. And what I find is that there are three sort of, I would say, consistent stumbling blocks that I hear over and over that keep parents from taking action or applying what they've learned. And so I want to break this down for you just a little bit today because I think some of these I might be able to offer some data that's going to help you maybe get over the hump of a few of them. So here they are. There are three of them. The first one is practical, and it's this. Often parents believe, I don't have the time. I don't have enough time to make the impact on my family that I want to make. Okay? The second one is I would say it's more relational. It's not as practical. It's more relational. Maybe it's emotional, intellectual, sort of an idea that we have to get past. But I have seen it for over 25 years and heard it, especially in the realm of education. Parents often do not believe that they have what it takes to raise their own children. They don't trust themselves, so we outsource a little bit. So I want to address that today. And then lastly, I would say that the next stumbling block is really a spiritual one. And I think this is one that really gets back to intention. It's this. Parents either do not believe that God has an intentional design for family. And what I mean by that is that He creates family on purpose in a very specific way for a very specific outcome. They either don't believe that or maybe haven't taken the time to actually really consider it. God's an intentional God. I think God's intentional about everything. I think he's intentional about how we use money. I think he's intentional about the marketplace. I think he's intentional about how he designed our body to work, about the seasons. So he's certainly intentional about marriage and about parenting and about family. So what I like to call that is a divine design. I think God has a divine design for our families. And if that's the case, then he has a purpose, and it includes a calling, and it includes an assignment. So let's talk about that just for a minute. Let's talk about the actual purpose. What's the purpose of a family? I think we overcomplicate this. God comes out of the gate in his word with this. It's pretty simple. It's to be fruitful and to multiply. That's the purpose of family. And a lot of times we interchange those, but they don't mean the same thing. To be fruitful actually means to produce good things, the fruits of the Spirit, to work and produce, to cultivate a home and to keep it, right? That means to make it and to maintain it. We're to be fruitful. And when we're fruitful, that's the family. When the family is fruitful, when the marriage is fruitful, then we're to multiply that. That is the picture of discipleship. Teach our children what we're doing so that they'll do those things. That's the purpose of family. Okay, let's talk about calling. What's the calling? This is a little bit different, I think. Hey, I think the calling on our life is the calling to Jesus. I think the calling is always Jesus calling us to himself. I think he does that as children of God. But as parents, we are children of his before we're parents to our children. And so I think the calling is to come to me and learn, grow in a deeper relationship. That helps us be transformed. It helps demonstrate to our children the relationship and the hoped relationship that we want for them to have. So the purpose and the calling pretty much across the board. But let's talk about assignment. What's the assignment that we have if we're a family? If you are a parent or a grandparent, the assignment that we have in family is the assignment that he gives us, just all of us across the board. It's to make disciples. Here's the difference. You may have other assignments, such as a job or a passion or something else the Lord's asking you to do. But if you are a parent, your primary assignment is your children. That's a primary disciple-making endeavor that God has given you. That's it. And so how are we and how can we be intentional about making our children, making disciples with them? So let's break down some of these stumbling blocks and see if we really can have a breakthrough on them. And to do that, I want to really address time with some real numbers here. It's really interesting because, time reveals influence. So how do you disciple? We disciple with and through the time that we spend with people. And so let me just break down a little bit of this data. I think some of it might surprise you. So this is time with a child per year in the U.S. These are averages, and it's a conservative average. But I want to share, we think that our children are being influenced at school and at church and at home. Let me just break down some of the time. So in America, a child in a traditional school setting, traditional school means 180 days a year. That's what the marker is for a traditional school. So a child in a traditional school spends 1,170 hours per year in the classroom. Okay, now I know that number sounds big, and it's big for one reason. I'm going to tell you about that in just a second. But just in sheer numbers, it sounds like a lot until you sort of zoom out. And what that equates to is 7 weeks per year. Your child is spending 7 straight weeks per year in a classroom if they're in a traditional school. All right, let's compare that to church. In church, if your child is going to church weekly and they're in a small group, so once a week to a church service and then a small group, it averages 130 hours per year. Do you know what that equals? That equals less than 1 week per year. Less than 1 week per year that they're spending in a church setting. And here's the part, if we're believing we don't have enough time. Here's the part that should reframe everything for us. Okay, buckle up. Parents and families spend 5,000 to 6,000 hours a year with their children. This is conservative, y'all. And those are waking hours, taking out school and church. So sleep isn't in there, school, church isn't in there. 5,000 to 6,000 hours a year, very conservative. That means that we have 30 to 36 weeks per year of time with our children. Now, again, I'm going to back up and I'm going to give a couple little caveats here. 7 weeks in a school setting doesn't sound like a lot when you compare it. However, the best way to learn is to be immersed. And so if you spent 7 weeks in another country, there's a lot that you would pick up in 7 weeks. So I'm not saying, that that's not an important number. But if we're pouring in for 30 to 36 hours, we can balance that. The question is, what are you doing with those 30 or 36 hours, or those 30 or 36 weeks in those 5,000 to 6,000 hours? That doesn't count sports. It doesn't count screen time. It doesn't count friends. It doesn't count any of that. What it is this is the amount of time that you have to make intentional decisions with. And so it's not even an opinion. It's just flat math. Okay, now I'm going to zoom out a little bit broader. Is everybody ready? Birth to 18. Here are the numbers here. From birth to 18, school influences children about 15,000 hours from birth to 18, from the time we're ready to launch. That equates to 90 weeks over the course of their childhood. 90 weeks they're in a school setting, traditional. Here it is with church. Church shapes them for roughly 2,300 hours, which equates to 14 weeks. Now I'm going to pause on that for a minute and just compare those two. If you're looking for people to partner with, and that's what a church and a school should be, right? If you're looking for people to partner with and you're wondering, do they share my values? And this is where they're going to be. If you're in a school that doesn't share your values and you're in a church that absolutely does, the school is getting 90 weeks and the church is getting 14. So that's just something to tuck in your back pocket. Here's where families come in. Families shape children for 90,000 to 100,000 hours in that birth to 18. That's how much time we spent, again, taking out sleep and all the things. That equates to 535 to 595 weeks out of the year that we have our children. And so parents, it's not that we don't have more time. It's not that we don't have enough time. Here it is. We don't just have more time with our children. We have 6 times more time than a school, and we have 40 times more than the church that you're very, very involved in. 40 times more. So time, not having it, that's really just not the truth. We have it. What are we doing? Okay, let me get the second one. Let's address this block that I think is relational or emotional, intellectual. The stumbling block that parents doubt that they have what it takes to raise their own children. Okay, and I'm going to just put this in here too. We're actually not raising children. We're raising adults, right? We need more adults in the world. And so we're raising adults. We're raising our grandchildren's parents. And so we want to really be intentional about what that's going to look like in the future. But we had this idea, and I talked about this a couple of episodes ago, that there's this pressure that we're going to mess it up. We don't have what it takes. We'd rather just hand it to somebody else and let them do it. Okay, where does that misplaced pressure come from? I think it's this. Parents feel a lot of pressure because really we've been taught in some form, and I don't know where it's come from. I think it's subtle. I think it's maybe subconscious. I think we're picking things up. Maybe a lot of the parental rights stuff now that's just so in our face. But we've been taught this in some form, that education happens in a school. It happens over there. And that discipleship, it happens in a church. That's where discipleship takes place. And that parenting happens in the leftover moments and the leftover minutes and in the leftover margins. That's a thought. And it's just biblically and historically and even practically completely backwards. It's just not true. The home has always been, we've talked about the dinner table a lot. The home has always been the primary space for formation, where families who are the primary shaping agents meet and huddle and teach and train. And so this idea and this notion that we don't have what it takes and that time is in the way, time's on our side. We just have to have faith that we've been called, and God's entrusted his children to us. They're not even our children. So I want to add this. I think sometimes what happens is we get really confused with the roles and the responsibilities of managing a family in a home and leading people. Now, for any of you who've been in an organization of any sort, you know that there's the leadership component where you're leading people and you're shaping them and you're developing leaders and the next people that are coming up in a company. And then there's management. You actually have to manage the task, manage the work that's happening. But they're two different things, and they both are important. The more important thing is leading the people, because the people are the ones who are managing. And I think sometimes in a home, what happens because we've abdicated and we're relying on other outside sources as the lead instead of the support is that we get confused with our time and we spend more time managing the affairs of the family and the affairs of the people in the home and the home itself and flip it instead of leading people. And so the greater thing is to consider the fact that we have the time to lead people, our primaries, to shape their hearts and their minds for their good and for their future. And so I think that's where that we break through from really what that stumbling block is. So the real question is not, do parents have enough time? It's, are we being intentional with the time that we already have? Time alone is not going to shape your children. It really won't. Direction shapes your children. And so I want you to just consider this for a minute. In Deuteronomy 6, it's pretty clear. I mean, I think between that and Proverbs 22:6, those are the pictures of discipleship. It's telling us how to disciple our children. And so Deuteronomy 6 says when you're walking and when you're lying down and when you're getting up, that's the picture. And so everyday moments are the curriculum for your family, right? We've just talked total twins, and we're hearing like the moments that we're walking, that's what's shaping and forming. And so formation does happen at the dinner table. And it happens in the car, sometimes better than sitting across the table because you're not making eye contact and information's going in. Formation happens during conflict. Formation happens while you're folding laundry. It happens when your children see what you celebrate and they see what you ignore. It's all formation. Formation happens in how we apologize and when we apologize. Hey, parents, you're discipling whether you mean to or not. And so the question really is, intentionality simply means choosing the direction that you're going to disciple instead of just drifting into it. And we're all guilty of that to some degree. All right, this brings us to the third stumbling block, and I want to dig into this for just a minute, and it's the spiritual one. Do you believe that God intentionally designed family to function a specific way with a specific outcome? In other words, do you believe that there's a divine design? And if there's anything that we want to talk about, we want to land there. We know that God is intentional. So, do we understand that purpose, that calling, and that assignment? If so, we move in a direction of understanding what is the vision that God has for our family. Why does intentionality matter? Okay, here, it matters this way. Because intentionality does not add pressure to your family. It adds purpose to your families and to your day. You're already spending all these hours. The question is, are you aware of how you're spending them? Those are the questions you start to ask. Intentionality matters for this reason, because formation is always occurring. We just talked about when it's occurring. But children are also learning who God is, how to love, and also what matters most to you. Values are so critical, families. It's not just about vision. It's also about values. And I would argue sometimes with children, values are maybe more important than vision. Parenting isn't neutral. They're always picking up what you believe. Listen, I have a friend. I'm in a I guess we call it a Bible study, but I'm in a small group of 5 couples that are grandparents. It's our little grandparents group. And we get together to pray for our grandchildren and to read a book here or there, to study something. But we also get together really to share ideas with one another of how we're impacting our grandchildren or how we could impact our grandchildren's lives. And this, why intentionality matters, comes to mind. One of my friends texted this week and said, God's really telling me as a grandparent to just be faithful in the little things. Just be faithful with my words, be faithful in the little things. And immediately when I read it, the Lord whispered in my ear, hey, Suzanne, the little things are the big things. The little things over time are the big things, because everything in the kingdom starts with a seed and it grows. And so whether the words are life-giving or they're destructive, those little words over the course of time are building. And so when you see intentionality matters, because small shifts over the course of a long time have great impact. And so one intentional conversation a week, if you just add that, huge long-term impact. Think of the weeks we just talked about. One shared habit, maybe it's a new prayer rhythm or a rhythm in your family. Maybe it's just saying one of those values out loud. If you do that over 90,000 hours, those small choices start to compound and they build over time. You will see formation happen. Let me just wrap with these couple. Hey, parents, intentionality matters because you set an atmosphere. You're the one that sets the culture of your child's heart. So churches, they plant seeds. They can plant seeds. They might even water seeds a little bit. In schools really are meant more to provide tools. But in terms of values and beliefs, tag you're it. You're the ones. They're looking at you. They're going to pick up what you put down. And then I would just say, lastly, intentional homes really produce resilient kids. I mean, kids don't need you to be perfect. We battle that so much. We don't want anything to go wrong. They don't need you to be perfect. They need you to be present, and they need you to be purposeful. And when we mess up, we just apologize and keep moving. We're growing, and that's good for them too, by the way. So what does intentional parenting really mean? It's this. It doesn't mean just more time. It actually means just being more aware, right? It means setting the direction and leading with purpose. Do you have a direction? It means naming what matters and voicing your values and slowing down long enough to notice what's happening. And when you take note of what's happening, it means offer encouragement or affirm, but also offer correction and direction. Don't just notice and move on.com. Notice and either affirm or correct. It's so important. Those are the shaping agents. It means aligning our rhythms and our calendars and our choices. There were so many times when we said, hey, as a family, we value this. And because we value this, this is what our calendar has to look like. Because we want this outcome, this is a yes and this is a no. And the no's were hard. But, if you think about, someone who's carving a statue and they're molding and forming something out of marble, the form does not come into view because you're adding to it. The form comes into view because you're chipping marble away and something takes form. Parents, it's so important to hold those values up and then to use them as a filter to make the decisions to take your family in a direction. And then I think just letting your faith show up in ordinary moments. I know so many times my husband would say, he's not a natural teacher. It's just not his gift set. And all those moments where he's like, I want to sit down and teach and disciple. And then, you'd sit there and it'd be just sort of awkward because it wasn't a natural gift. I think the more important thing is just let Jesus show up as you go in the moments. Don't put that pressure on yourself. Be who you are and lead like you lead. Just show them the way. All right, I'm going to end with this. How do we do this? You're hearing all this. Listen, I love to help not just organizations, but families figure out their vision. I have a little course, Cultivating Your Family's Future. If you want to do vision and you want to do mission, you want to do core values, go to beaconparent.com and let's do it. I love it. But you don't have to get into that amount of detail in order to just begin. If you want to begin to have direction, you want to begin to have vision, I'm going to give you just 3 very quick, simple ideas, and then I'm going to leave with hopefully a little bit more inspiration that will move you to revelation. If you just want to start right now because you're like, I want more of that, I don't know what to do, here are 3 quick things. Stop and look up. You're going to look up, you're going to look in, and you're going to look out. Look up. Stop for a minute, spend time with God, and ask God some questions. Hey, God, I'm asking you, how do you see my family? How do you see them? Show me what you see. And then ask him, what do you see for this family in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years? What's your vision for this family? And I know our mind goes to, I have a vision of having a beach house and 47 grandkids and all the things. That's not going to be what God talks about more than likely. If he does, good for you. His vision is going to be about character, and it's going to be about how you're going to love and how you're going to serve and what those things are that form the inside of their heart. Ask him. I mean, the Bible is full of saying ask, and when you seek, you'll find. So look up for a minute. And then if you want to be intentional, I would say look in. Spend some time in prayer and reflection and ask God to search your heart. We bring things from our past into our future and we send them forward through legacy. And some of those things we very intentionally want to do. And there are others that we want to let fall by the wayside. So ask God to search your heart about the things that maybe you want to let go of and make old things new. Forgive where you need to forgive. Heal the things that need to be healed, because all of that's impacting not just you, but your children and their future. So take the time to look in. And when you're looking in, don't just worry about getting the old stuff out. Ask God, what is it that I value? What do we value? Don't pick more than 5 to 7. You won't even be able to remember them. But what are the 5 to 7 things? And if you're married and you have a spouse, ask both of you independently, what are the 5 to 7 things that we value? And then get together and form those values and state them and start to tell your children, this is what we value as a family. This is who we are. Because the core values form the culture of your family, and the culture is how you do things in a family. And those things get picked up. They are caught, not taught. They get picked up. So do that. And then lastly, I would say this. Look out. After you look up, after you look in, look out and be aware of the world around you. As parents, I would say this, take an inventory of the things that break your heart in this world. There are a lot of them. I would say take note of the things and the battles that you've overcome. You've overcome them. Freedom is for freedom's sake. So there may be something there. What people group do you want to help? What problem do you want to solve? What are the things on your heart for the world? And when you identify those things, invite your children into some kingdom work. Some of the most powerful times that we had as a family is when we went to Africa when they were little, and they watched us work, and we were all learning things at the same time. It was powerful. It shaped our family. So what are the things that are on your heart and God's put on your heart? You don't have to wait to do those. Invite your children in and let them just pick that up. So look up, look in, look out. And I'm going to wrap up with this. Why do this? Because first of all, and most importantly, God's intentional, and we're made in his image. He calls us to steward well the gifts that we've been given, and there's no greater gift than our children and our family. So ultimately, we're intentional because it honors God. But I want to talk to you just for a second as you go into this maybe this summer and spring, and you have some time to think and plan and breathe, and say this on a personal and a human level. Why do this? And I'm going to tell you. Because you're leaving a legacy every day, whether you realize it or not. Every day you're making a mark. It's happening. And one day, you're not just going to look up or look in or look out. You're going to look back. I promise you that. I'm getting close to 60 around here, and I'm speaking right now from experience. You will look back. And what you don't want to do, I don't even think it's from God, but you don't want to look back with regret, and you don't want to look back with guilt and shame. None of that's all from the pit anyway. But you will look back, and what you want to be able to do is say, not just I did the best I could, but I was intentional. And I could have learned more. I wish I knew a little bit of this or that. But I was intentional with what I did do. And I formed and shaped the way that God put on my heart. And my kids, right, the verse, there's no greater joy than my children walking with the Lord. That's what you want to look back and be able to say. And that comes with intention, obviously with the Holy Spirit, with the God's prompting. But as you think about this, I'm going to share a poem. I'm going to try to do it without crying. I'm just not even sure. I'm ready. But I'm going to share a poem with you because I think the poem, it's not just information, and I don't think it'll be just inspiration. I actually think this might be able to move people, families, into revelation. I think it captures what happens in all of our lives, right? And my hope is that revelation will move you to action. So allow me to attempt to read this poem. It's called, If You Could Go Back One More Day. And here's how it goes. I'm 80 years old, and somehow I woke up in my 32-year-old body just for one day. I wake up to little hands tugging at the blankets. Mommy, wake up, they shout. I blink and I sit up slowly. My babies, they're small again. I gasp and then I cry. They climb into bed, wiggling and giggling. I used to rush through those mornings, but not today. I pull them close, I hug them tight, I kiss their messy hair, and I hold their little hands. This time, I soak in every second. I catch my reflection in the bathroom mirror. No deep lines, no gray hair, my younger face. I used to think I looked old at 41. What a silly thought. I stare for a moment and I think, you're so beautiful. Then I find my husband in the kitchen making coffee, and he looks strong and young. I wrap my arms around him tightly. He looks surprised, and I think, maybe we didn't hug enough back then. We talk about the day, nothing big. But today, it all feels big. I memorized the sound of his voice. We pile into the car. Kids are arguing over seatbelts. Someone drops a snack. Crumbs are everywhere. I used to get so frustrated. I soak in the noise, the chaos. I know the car will be quiet and spotless for many years to come. I'll miss the mess. Dinner is loud and unorganized. No one wants to sit still. They're shouting and giggling and a little arguing. There's just so much life. I don't clean up right away. I sit still and I watch, trying to burn all of it into my memory. Before bed, I pick up the phone. I call my mom. I hear her voice. Mom? Mom! I haven't heard this voice in so many years. I close my eyes and I let her words wash over me. I tell her I love her again and again, and I never want to hang up. This time, I don't leave anything unsaid. At bedtime, I don't skip the pages of the story. Not tonight. I read every single word. And then I ask, can we read one more book? They say yes. And I don't want the day to end. I got one more day. And this time I knew. This was joy. This was love. Those little hands, that loud, messy dinner, our strong young bodies with no aches or pains, our parents who are still alive. It all mattered so much more than we ever realized. Okay, y'all, at this point in life, those are the things that you think about. And I just want to close with this. Listen, you don't need to replace your church, and you don't need to outperform your school. Keep doing that. Let them support you. Here's what you need to do, in my opinion, and I humbly offer it. Activate the influence that you already have. Your kids are looking at you, and it's a crazy world. God has given parents the most powerful discipleship environment on the earth, and it's called home. The question is whether you're going to steward all this time in that home on purpose, with direction, with intention, as you leave the legacy you're going to leave and you build the next generation. I hope as you reflect on this season and today's episode that it sincerely helps you parent with purpose, disciple with direction, and leave an intentional legacy.